Okay. Shalom. Welcome back. It's been a good week.
It has.
Welcome to the Siloam Center Wellness webcast called Chat with the Docs. This is the only place on the internet where you get two alternative medicine practitioners sitting around chatting without sipping their tea with their pinkies raised. Because we don't drink our tea that way. In fact, I'm not even drinking tea. I'm drinking water from a blue mug. So, I'm Mo Wolf, the acupuncturist here at the Siloam Center for Traditional and Integrative Medicine.
And I'm Dr. Noel. I'm the chiropractor here at the Siloam Center. So, good to be here.
And this is really cool. Over in the Philippines right now is our all things techie guru, Hero, who is trying to get this around so that we can have a better presentation for you. But it's Hero's birthday today. And so I would like both of you that are currently watching live. Boy, we're big time, aren't we?
Someday.
Someday we'll be as big as Oprah. Both of you that are watching live, let's give a big collective happy birthday, Hero. I can't hear you. Oh, wait. Maybe your mic's not on. Mine's on now. Hero is now older than certain forms of soil. I'm not going to say how old you are, Hero. It's okay. He's above 25. How's that for a cop-out? Happy birthday, Hero.
Happy birthday.
We love you, brother. Today on Chat with the Docs, happy day. You're probably going to be hearing some banging around outside. That's a contractor. It looks like he's about to put up a rain gutter, which, you know what they say, timing is everything. Anyway, today we are going to be spending the next hour of your time talking about mitochondria. Mm-hmm. Now, not a lot of people know what mitochondria is. If you've gone through grade school science,
maybe you know the basics.
Junior high, you probably know that it's an organelle in the cell, and it makes power, makes energy. Power. Sorry, I'm getting all Machiavellian on you. It's so much more than that. And mitochondria are foundational to your health and foundational to who we are. They're just phenomenal little rascals. But there's even studies that are showing that this concept of adrenal fatigue that we've been exploring for the last, I don't know how many years, 20 some years. In acupuncture training, we're told that adrenal fatigue most closely resembles a kidney yin deficiency. And the more closer you get to a kidney adrenal crisis, the closer you get to complete yang collapse of the body and yin collapse. In chiropractic, you guys learn it more Western biomedically based to describe it, but there's a lot of research that's indicating that what we're calling adrenal fatigue is actually so much deeper in the body than just the kidneys and the adrenal glands.
You have to actually go down to the cellular level.
The subcellular level, yeah. These little bean-like structures that when, you're in junior high and you're coloring your cell models and you're saying, this is the nucleus.
The purples and pinks.
The purples and pinks with the squiggly lines. It sounds like a driving test for someone who's myopic. The mitochondria in our little models that we always did, there's one, maybe two mitochondria in the cell. The reality is in the average cell, the average muscle cell is going to have between 800 and 1,000 mitochondria per cell. Mm-hmm. And each one of these cells is going to require 1 unit of energy and 1 unit of oxygen for survival, for its basic fuel. Our cells, it's so mind-boggling to me, because in Chinese medicine we're taught to look at the macroverse and the microverse. The macroverse meaning the universe around us, how these systems all have a pattern. And then you come down to the microverse. It's kind of like that whole Mandelbrot set. It looks like a kaleidoscope, and you get this really weird picture when they chart out all of the numbers on the Mandelbrot set. And as you zoom in, you get these incredible patterns, but it all starts all over again. And so when we're looking at the fact that your cells require 1 unit of energy and 1 unit of oxygen to function in your muscle cells, it's almost like a combustion engine. It requires fuel, it requires oxygen, and it requires a spark. So do your cells. And the ignition is the mitochondria. So the muscle cells, you've got 800 to 1,000 mitochondria per cell. Your cardiac cells, you're averaging around 2,000 mitochondria per cell. And these cells are going to be requiring more oxygen and more units of energy to function. These guys are going to be requiring double the amount of oxygen and energy that your muscle cells are going to be
because
using.
It has to keep going the whole time.
It doesn't get to rest. It's a different type of muscle tissue as well. The cardiac muscle fibers are different than, say, your bicep muscle fibers.
They're involuntary. They just keep going.
They keep going.
Otherwise, if we didn't have, the fuel of life, that's death.
That's right.
So that's the easy nutshell version of it, but we're going to go deeper.
We're very binary, aren't we? You're either alive or you're dead. Your synapses are either firing or they're quiet. Your muscles are either contracting or they're not. The way our bodies are designed, we're very binary. It's either on or it's off. Well, the heart muscle, those fibers, they're always either boom, 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 boom. They're always either flexing or they're relaxed. But it's done in such a way that the autonomic function of the body just has it on a steady, you don't even have to think of it.
Just like breathing.
Autopilot.
You don't have to think about breathing unless you do think about it, then you get off your rhythm.
Or you're asthmatic and weird like me, and then you have
That's
problems
for another
with it
show,
anyway. Oh, boy. So the cardiac cells have 2,000 mitochondria per cell. The brain cells, get this, you with the brain fog. Yeah, I'm talking to you. Your brain cells have 5,000 mitochondria per cell, and they're using 10 times the amount of oxygen and 10 times the amount of energy that your muscle cells use. Your brain is using 25% of the energy that your body requires, that your body is producing. So, and jiu-jitsu likes to choke each other out. They're weird people. So you get somebody on your back, and some gorilla gets on your back, and he puts you in the choke, and they shut off the carotid arteries, and everyone's saying, "Oh, everyone sees the movies and they think, oh, you can't breathe." No, it's a blood choke. They're stopping the blood supply to the brain. And everyone in the dojo is thinking, oh, the blood got shut off to the brain, and the blood, the brain doesn't have enough blood, and the guy passes out. That's part of it. But the blood is carrying what? It's carrying the oxygen and the glucose. And when the brain doesn't get the oxygen that it needs, remember, it needs 10 times more energy than muscle tissue. Within just a few seconds,
you have cell death.
You have cell death. I had a judo instructor choke me out with a really mean choke. and the world started to go black in about 2.5 seconds of him just putting me in this choke. That's how quickly your body responds to a lack of oxygen.
Same with if somebody has like a stroke or a drowning victim.
Exactly.
That's why timing is everything in those circumstances.
Well,
you have the same thing.
And with a stroke, it's not that you're having complete 100% occlusion to the entire brain. Mm-hmm. You're having complete 100% occlusion of blood supply, i.e. oxygen, to specific cells. Mm-hmm. And those specific cells, and in whatever region of the brain, are going to present differently.
Yep.
But there's some basic overall guidelines that you look for, the whole FAST acronym, right? The facial, if one side of the face starts to melt or gets paralyzed. What was that for? Arm.
Yep, it goes face, arm,
speech, and tongue. Speech. The tongue. And this is what's, when I first started learning about endogenous wind pathologies in Chinese medicine, quit your snickering out there. Endogenous wind. Right now, everyone's saying, what is he talking about? Now you know the struggles of my family. In Chinese medicine, wind is, you have five pathogens. You have hot, you have cold, you have damp, you have dry, and you have wind. Well, wind can be either interior or exterior wind. We think in terms of more neurological type symptoms, and I know that that's painting with a very broad brush, but that's what we think in terms of in Chinese medicine when we say wind. But when there's wind in the body, you get a quiver in the tongue or a deviation in the tongue. And so the T in FAST for checking for a stroke is that tongue deviated? Is it pointing to one side or the other?
Slurred speech.
Slurred speech. The person's tongue will go to a side. So now you start talking like Gabby Hayes and you can't control it. That's that whole the T for the acronym. So when you've got 5,000 to get back on, I'm sorry, you poor thing, the burden you bear having to be shackled on YouTube with this goofball. To get back to mitochondria, how's that for a transition? Better?
Yeah, that's what keeps the show interesting. Bring it in loops and bring it back.
For the brain, you've got 5,000 mitochondria per cell. These mitochondria, we typically think in terms of their powerhouses, their power plants. They're producing ATP. They're doing so much more than that. But when you've got 5,000 of these things in each brain cell, some people have more brain cells than others. The average teenager has what, about, it's 3, is it? The average politician has about 2.5. But when there's something going on with mitochondrial function, when there's mitochondrial dysfunction, where are you most likely going to notice it? You're going to notice it with fatigue in the body. Yep. You're going to notice it with brain fog. So what are some mitochondrial facts? Do you have any fun mitochondrial facts? I do.
Put me on the spot with some of these. I keep thinking, and I know it's a quote, and you probably know it because I know it's in the Chinese medicine world. I just keep thinking of
bird on the wing is better than bird in the swamp. No. Bird on the wing is not as good as bird in the.
Isn't that like one Confucius. In the hand is better than 2 in the bush or something like that? I don't know where we're going with this, but anyways. When you're talking about your drink before with the coffee, isn't it a Chinese medicine? It was like a quote at some point. I'm not good with names and that. But if you have, let's say, energy that you're stealing from tomorrow, you'll pay for it later. Like if you're putting caffeine into the body,
yeah,
that's almost like fake energy. You're not actually getting true energy like you need with the mitochondria. And that's kind of deep where we're going to go into that. That's just what keeps circling in my brain.
Yes. If you are putting, well, and this doesn't just work with mitochondria, this works with everything.
Mhm.
If you're putting fake stuff into your body, okay, think in terms of anabolic steroids.
Yeah.
I know this is way off in another topic and in another direction. Think in terms of anabolic steroids because it's a good model. Somebody that's supplementing anabolic steroids, you get this big meathead that's shooting himself up with this stuff. What are some of the things you look for? You look for a guy who's losing his hair because his testosterone isn't functioning anymore.
His chest.
His chest is usually broken out in acne,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're losing body hair. They're breaking out in acne. The testes actually start to shrink. Why? Because the body's no longer producing the testosterone and some of the other hormones that it needs because it's getting it artificially.
Yep.
Think in terms of an economy. We just went through this whole crazy thing with COVID. And we realized the Chinese are making all of our drugs. The Chinese are making all of our PPE. We can't get it right now because we're not bringing anything across the pond. How do we make it? If you are supplementing it, you're not going to be making it. If you're supplementing fake energy, your cells say, well,
we don't need to.
We've got this stimulant artificially stimulating our tissues and stimulating these little glad glands in the brain. I know that's not the correct term. Work with me. That artificial stimulus is there, and the mitochondria are communicating with the tissues around them, and they're saying, well, maybe we don't need the ATP that we were supposed to produce.
Why are we throwing energy at this when we don't have to? We're
Right.
getting it from elsewhere. Let's put the energy other places, or let's
because the mitochondria do more than just produce energy. Oh, wow. We just went beyond freshman level biology.
We did. You even brought the hormones in with the communication. It all plays together like that.
We could end the show now, couldn't we? Under normal conditions, okay, your body has around 37 trillion cells, with each cell producing 10 million molecules of ATP daily. Get your mind around that. Get your mind. 37 trillion with a T cells are in your body. Each of those cells is producing 10 million molecules of ATP. What does that mean? It means your body's producing your own weight in ATP every day.
Mm-hmm.
Your body doesn't store ATP. Your body makes it, burns it. Your body makes the ATP and gets rid of it because it breaks down quickly. It's very volatile, actually.
Mm-hmm.
ATP, your body doesn't store it. Your body has, at the maximum, about 90 seconds of ATP on hand at any given time? That's it. And that's just because it's produced in the cell. Your cell is transferring it from the mitochondria to the different parts of the cell structure that it needs it.
Mm-hmm.
That's that transit time is about 90 seconds. The whole "you are fearfully and wonderfully made" just comes to mind whenever I think of mitochondria. Mm-hmm. And we're not even getting into the anatomy of mitochondria yet, the complex 1, 2, 3, and 4. Their complex 4 is a nanomotor. Yes, I said a motor within your body. And as we see, there's tens of billions of these things, tens of trillions of these things. This little nanomotor, this complex 4, which is, there's thousands of them per mitochondria. They're on that inner membrane of the mitochondria. This complex 4 is a nanomotor that's spinning at, I think it's 9,000 RPM as it's pumping protons from one side of a membrane to another, changing glucose to ATP. Mm-hmm. When you get glucose into a cell coming across that cell membrane, that glucose, it's not just bing, we wave a magic wand and now we have ATP. No, you've got 19 different steps to change glucose into ATP. Sorry, my ADD kicked in there and I saw shiny light. But if you're artificially stimulating the body with energy, that's going to give a false presentation in the brain of making you think that you've got energy, your mitochondria do, at this point, one of two things that we know of. It's got either a battleship mode, where it is the core of your immune system, or it's your power plant producing the ATP. But just like so many people that are driving out there and texting, your mitochondria can't walk and chew gum at the same time. It can't do two things at once. It can either only do the battleship mode or only do the ATP, the power plant mode. And I wish our tech would have worked, because I have a really cool slide for that. It's got the USS Wisconsin firing broadside. It's cool. And then it's got some neat little power plant with all of its lights on. It's pretty weird like that. So we've talked a lot about ATP. What in the world is ATP? Do you want to answer that?
It's energy. I don't know how far we got to break it.
It's the basic unit of energy. It's adenosine triphosphate. It's this really beautifully structured molecule with 3 phosphates. It's got hydrogens in there. It's got oxygens. It's got a little bit of carbon in there, nitrogen, and it's got a what is it? I'm looking at it now. It's got 3 aromatic rings, but they're closed. So I guess that wouldn't be an aromatic ring, would it? Yeah, it would. If it's closed, it's still an aromatic ring.
The gist of it, our body's able to utilize it.
It's fuel. And it's the basic building block of fuel in your body that your body uses. You know, we think, hey, your body's burning fat. No, your body is storing what? Glucose in the form of adipose tissue, fat. Because again, we don't store the ATP. And then that fat gets converted into glucose in the bloodstream by the whole insulin breakdown process. And then the glucose gets turned into ATP in the cells and then in the mitochondria.
That's why also if you have too much glucose or sugar in your diet, the body's not going to keep kicking out the energy level or the ATP.
Right.
You're going to get that fat storage.
It's going to turn it to fat to store it away. Again, you don't store the ATP, you store the glucose in the form of the fat.
Because I think a lot of people, they think, you know, the sugar is floating around the excess in the blood. I think maybe they think from those tiny little sugar molecules that they're getting somehow converted just to fat, but really it's that ATP.
Yeah. Now, remember we said that your body is going to be producing, what did I say, 10 million molecules of ATP a day, something like that. Your body is going to be producing its weight in ATP a day. So for a skinny runt such as myself, I'm about 150 pounds. I get geeky. I want to know, what is that every minute? That works out to about a little over 1.5 ounces per minute of ATP that my body's producing. So that's 1.67 ounces of ATP per minute that my body is going to be producing. You produce your weight in this stuff. So if you are literally producing your weight every day, this is pretty important. This is pretty foundational. But remember I said that the mitochondria, it takes 19 steps to convert a glucose molecule into ATP. Wow, Fabrizio, or why do I want to call you Fabrizio? Hero's got the graphics up on the Facebook feed. That's cool.
That's nice.
The molecule of glucose getting transferred into, changed into ATP, there's 19 steps. 19 steps, which means that there's 19 enzymes that are involved, which means that there's 19 coenzymes. Now, how do you disrupt that ATP production? There's something that Master D, if you're watching, brother, I miss you. I can't wait till we can get back in the gym and start practicing again. But he taught me something very cool about jiu-jitsu. In jiu-jitsu, in order to make an attack on somebody, you've got all these different steps that you've got to take. And the really fun ones are just a couple of steps. I'm lazy. I don't like the really cool stuff. To me, simple is cool. Let's say there's 5 steps to an attack. What does the guy have to do to defend it? Disrupt one of those steps. That's it. If you disrupt one of those steps, my attack is over. I can't attack you anymore. I've got to rethink it, regroup, try something else. With mitochondria, with ATP, if any one of those 19 steps of transition from glucose to ATP, any one of those 19 steps is messed up, any one of those pathways for enzyme production to produce one of those 19 enzymes, any one of those pathways that produces the 19 coenzymes is messed up, and you're missing any one of those things, any one of those variables, you don't have ATP.
To any of them.
To any of them. So if you're lacking any one of these pathways, it's not producing.
It's like a nuclear power plant and nothing's working.
Or my old 1977 Triumph Spitfire with one short somewhere in the wiring harness. Nothing works. Hence, I don't have that car anymore. It caught fire. I found the short eventually. Well, that's also a perfect example of what happens if you don't take care of these shorts in that pathway to produce these coenzymes and the enzymes to make the ATP. You're going to have a catastrophic event. You're going to have an autoimmune storm. You're going to have cancers. You're going to have heart disease.
You're going to have small events come to a large-scale disease.
You end up with a perfect storm, don't you? So what is disease? Is disease a singularity of an event? No, it's a perfect storm. I heard a really, I like cool facts. I'm kind of geeky that way. I heard a really cool quote this morning. There are over 250,000 drugs approved for use right now in the U.S. Do any one of those 250,000 drugs, are any one of them designed to rebuild a cell?
No.
No.
They're to replace the cell function.
Yes. And what did we say about artificially supplementing and replacing?
It's never as good as the original.
It's never as good as the original. And what happens to the original? The body says, well, we don't need to do that anymore.
So it shuts it down.
Right. You use it or you lose it. So don't misunderstand what I'm saying. Don't put words in my mouth. I'm not saying pharmacology bad, sticks and twigs good.
No,
there's a time and place for it. If you are starting to have, if you're a cardiac patient and you're having chest pains, you take that nitro tab.
Yeah, because you don't have time for it to turn around at that point.
Right.
Because that's the serious event that's coming up from the disease process.
That's that perfect storm. And at that point, you've got to have serious intervention. What I'm saying is, before you get to the perfect storm, we need to derail that storm by making sure that the cells are producing energy, making sure that the mitochondria are functioning optimally. Now, what are some signs that your mitochondria aren't functioning properly? Well,
like you said, brain fog.
Brain fog.
You just don't have the motivation.
Yep. Fatigue.
Your body's getting run down. Your skin's looking dull.
And you're getting sick all the time. And you're not getting over it. You get colds all the time.
Well, your body's functioning at minimum.
You just have a weak immune system. You do have a weak immune system. The heart of it's not functioning. Now, remember what I said? Your mitochondria can only either be a battleship or it can only be a power plant.
Yeah.
It's one or the other. So what happens when we do get a virus?
You're just trying to produce ATP and it can't be the power ship or the battleship.
And you get tired, right?
Yeah.
Because your body says, okay, we got to go into battleship mode. And so it designates a certain percentage of your mitochondria to start working on killing this virus, to start communicating and directing the fight. I guess battleship wouldn't be it's dramatic, but it's not the best. I think AWACS would be the better. That plane with the big satellite dish on top.
If your body can't even function to do the minimal processing to keep you alive, to keep that heart tissue, keep that lung tissue, to keep you breathing, your heart going, how are you supposed to do extra and try to fight while doing the minimum to stay alive?
Right. And so your body takes a certain percentage of these mitochondria, shifts it over to directing your immune response. Now that group of mitochondria that are working on fighting this battle, they used to produce ATP. They're not doing that anymore. So your energy levels go, which is why you feel like the udders on a snake. You're just exhausted. You're
down and out.
You're lower than low. I just realized I used the phrase udders on a snake.
I was going to say, I wasn't going to question it.
I used that in public.
I'll define which snakes are mammals. That might be my next.
Well, can you think of anything lower and more irritable? So what are some things that, what are some basic things that cause disruption of those coenzyme and enzyme pathways in the body? And when I speak of pathways, I'm not talking about the yellow brick road. No, I'm talking about these, we call pathways, these systems of how certain molecules are produced in our bodies. In this case, enzymes and coenzymes. So this entire chain of systems that take certain nutrients that from the moment it hits our small bowel, brings it through, processes it. We're made up of so many hundreds of millions of factories in our bodies. Trillions of factories. And the pathway would be that production pathway to get from raw materials to market, to get from the small bowel to, in this case, the enzyme or coenzymes used in production of ATP.
I know, was it 2 weeks ago we talked about one reason that things could get derailed with the glyphosate coming in?
Glyphosate's a huge one.
Mm-hmm.
An interesting study, I don't know if I buy it completely, talking about COVID, is pointing out that the areas where COVID is hitting the hardest in the United States are around rivers that drain heavy farmland areas. Rivers that are heavily polluted with glyphosates. It's interesting. I don't really buy it because out here in the Midwest, our soils are completely ruined with glyphosate.
Yeah, with all the farming and use like that.
We've got it in our wells. It's everywhere.
It seems to be like high population areas, but if you look around the Great Lake areas, that's where the ports are.
Yeah.
So I don't know either if that could necessarily be linked up that way. I guess I get where they're going with it, but there's also higher dense populations when you have shipments coming in.
It's an interesting thought, the whole glyphosate connection, but I think it's a factor. I don't think it's the factor. But with mitochondrial function, glyphosate goes in there, and that glyphosate, we talked about glycine in the past, and glycine, which is a protein in non-vascular tissues, the collagen tissues that make the ligaments and tendons and cartilage, and how the glyphosate replaces glycine in that protein formation.
Make it rough.
They make it rough. They fold the proteins over. Well, remember I talked a little bit ago about complex 4 in the electron transfer chain in the mitochondria, and we've got the little nanomotor that's spinning at 9,000 RPM. It's made up of proteins. When the glyphosate takes the place of glycine in that little protein and it folds that protein now, that motor's not going to work. That motor's going to fold over and break. So, I'm sorry, there's a lag in the Facebook, and I looked over and we were just both cutting up. Told you I was ADD. Anyway, glyphosate gets into that little nanomotor and it completely wrecks the nanomotor. So now you're not pumping the protons across that membrane, and you're not using that as the motor that converts glucose to ATP.
It's like putting sugar in somebody's gas tank.
Exactly like that.
Don't do that.
Have you ever done that?
No, I'm not that bad. I'm bad, but I'm not that bad.
Gee, you're swell.
Thought about it.
Another thing, so the glyphosate literally breaks the nanomotors in our mitochondria. Another thing that really disrupts those enzyme and coenzyme pathways, we also talked, glyphosate will do that as well. We talked about how glyphosate is a chelator, and so it pulls the minerals, is it positively charged minerals, out of the body?
I think so, yeah.
And that includes these minerals that are essential for production of these enzymes and coenzymes. So now you're erasing that. 212 minerals that it's chelating and pulling out and is ruining these pathways. Another big thing is heavy metals. A little hairspray and a hair dryer, you could pull off the heavy metal look.
Probably. I got the curls.
So the heavy metals go in there. And what do I mean by heavy metals? I'm talking about arsenic. I'm talking about mercury. I'm talking about cadmium. Even lead. Even some of the metals that our bodies need, copper, iron. We need these things to a certain extent. But once you start getting too much of them, they become heavy metal toxicity. Mm-hmm. I don't like that term, heavy metal toxicity. Never could stand the music, if you can call it music. A better term, I think, would be toxic metals, because there are metals that are needed, and there are metals that, well, quite frankly, they're toxic to us. And these metals, the arsenic, the lead, the cadmium, these things, they break up these pathways for creating these enzymes and coenzymes. So now you don't have the enzymes and coenzymes. You got nothing going into the factory to produce ATP. You've got a factory. This is an old GM town, Janesville. We have old GM factory that they just tore down recently. But in the old days, you'd have the trains coming in with the metal, the raw material of metal. But if you didn't have the other trains coming in with the rubber, with the electricity coming into the building to run the equipment, if you were lacking any one of those other components,
you're not getting the finished product.
That car's not getting made. Mm-hmm. So the heavy metals, the glyphosates, these things all work to disrupt that supply chain of everything other than the glucose. You've got to have it all. It's all got to be working. So what do we do as practitioners? We've got to check you and find out how bad your toxic metal load is.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to check you and find out how much glyphosate is being stored in your body. We've got to check and see some of the other factors that we haven't even gotten to yet. How bad this problem is in your body. One of the simplest ways that we can do it is the little energy test kit with an ATP vial. Are you testing weak for ATP? If you're testing weak for ATP, maybe we need to boost that.
Mm-hmm.
There are supplements that we can do. There are herbs that we can do. Pathologically, every Parkinson's patient that I've tested,
toxic metals.
There's toxic metals involved, yeah, but every one of them tests very low on mitochondrial function.
Mm-hmm.
And I can put my Parkinson's pathology vial in their hand and test them, and it's very, very weak, and I can be treating them for that all day. But as soon as I put a particular supplement that boosts mitochondrial function into their hand, boom, rock steady. They no longer respond to the Parkinson's. Very interesting, isn't it?
You got to get deeper than just the symptoms.
We got to quit treating the symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not just scolding allopathic medicine. That's their shtick. I get it. You get into a car accident, you want your symptoms treated.
Mm-hmm.
You'll work on your driving habits later. By the way, I doubt you'll ever see this video, but I just want to give a shout out to the lady in the light gray Ford Explorer this morning that decided to run the stoplight. The rest of us that were at that stoplight, we salute you.
Did they make it?
Oh, they made it. They slowed down and then just went right through, and everyone else at the stoplight, or at the stop sign, we looked at her, we went like this, we looked at each other. This is not, we do not need an example of entropy in the traffic pattern. Learn what stop signs are and stop. Where was I before you so rudely interrupted me?
Well, kind of like you said with the person who's having a heart attack, you need answers to your symptoms right then and there.
Right.
That's why we're saying, we're not taking away from other professions with allopathic medicine. But
there's a time and place for reactive medicine.
Yeah, exactly. You want to get to the point, get past your symptoms, but then you got to get into treating the cause of it so you don't have it reoccur again.
Which is what you and I do all day long. We look for the cause and we treat the cause. Had a guy in yesterday who sore foot. It's been sore it'll be a year this fall. Initially, the first practitioner that he saw said, it's Morton's neuroma. You'll just have to deal with it. Well, yeah, it's Morton's neuroma, but what caused it?
The inflammation that's causing it.
So then we go a little bit deeper. You find out that a month earlier, he damaged his other knee. Didn't stop running.
Okay.
So now we have a compensatory gait, right?
Mm-hmm.
That compensatory gait changes the tensegrity and the structure of your body. So now those little bones in the feet are having to take and carry the load from a different angle. So now you start getting inflammation built into the nerve tissue. Now you end up with this Morton's neuroma.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but why is it that after the knee was healed up, after the gait has changed, why is that foot continuing to go downhill?
It's not meant to function that way.
It turns out the guy had Lyme disease and a Bartonella infection. The guy was in the military for a long time, exposed to heavy metals on firing ranges, as well as all of the other solvents and everything else that these guys have to work with.
His battleship wasn't working.
His battleship wasn't working, and now you've got an infection because Lyme and Bartonella, Babesia, Epstein-Barr, these guys are opportunistic. They're like aluminum siding salesmen in Yazoo City, Mississippi. a hailstorm comes through. Hey, we're out there. These things are going to look for points of weakness in the body, and then they're going to exploit it. They get into that tissue and they say, oh, this is nice. And now we've got a pocket of inflammation that's exacerbated by the infection. Mm-hmm. The infection has now moved in. That foot was red and inflamed, painful on palpation. Start treating it. Start killing these bugs. Start pulling those heavy metals, those toxic metals out. Start pulling the glyphosates out. Game changer. Game changer.
Can produce the correct ATP.
With acupuncture, as soon as you start putting the needles in, the way I treat, I use the opposite hand. His foot started feeling warm. The redness started to dissipate. Why? Because now you have vasodilation. Now you're bringing more blood into the area.
More energy into the area.
More energy into the area. You're flushing out the infection, so the liver can start to try to catch up and clean it all out. Beautiful. Beautiful. We are now at that part of our show. It's about 10 till. And we are now at that part of the show where we have your questions. We are here to take your questions. So if anyone watching has any questions, this is your time to either message us on Facebook or put it into the YouTube. Drop a comment in the YouTube, wherever you want to go. This is your chance to ask us all of your health-related questions, and I'm feeling frisky. We'll take on any other question you might have. Just don't ask me how you rotate your tires, if it's back to front, if it's diagonal. I never could figure that out. I always have to reference that. So
we know about engines. We don't do the tire work.
At
least in
figuratively. Okay. So Anne is asking, I have brain fog, diagnosed with fibromyalgia. What would be your approach? I'm sorry, Anne. I'm trying to just streamline this. What would be your guys' approach to treating that situation? Brain fog, fibromyalgia. Well, the
functional medicine approach would be how we'd see what things are causing those symptoms. Right.
We would look at blood work. I'm sure you've probably been through
decent amount, I would imagine, by now.
A lot of different practitioners. Number one, fibromyalgia is a syndrome. Now, what's the difference between a syndrome and disease? Syndrome is you fit 5 of the 20 boxes for a specific disease. So we can't say that you have this disease, but you've got this nebulous group of symptoms. It's something. Well, in the last 10, 15 years, they actually allowed us this concept of fibromyalgia syndrome. They'll often treat it with SSRI drugs, antidepressants, anti-anxiety drugs. Yeah, good luck with that. The reality, Anne, is, yeah, you've got some mitochondrial dysfunction. I can guarantee it. Mm-hmm. But what is triggering this syndrome? Anytime you're dealing with a problem, you need to know the right questions to ask. You just can't say, you have fibromyalgia and take it at face value. We need to ask the right questions. Why do you have fibromyalgia? What's causing this? Oftentimes there's an emotional root. There was a study done quite a while ago. I remember reading it in school, where 70% of women who have fibromyalgia ended up having some form of sexual abuse as a preteen or a teen. So yeah, we can get more specific when you come in, and we can talk more specifically. We can look at your labs that have been done. We can do the energy testing to see how your mitochondrial function is doing. We can start working on this. The brain fog is there not just from toxins, biotoxins floating around in your brain, messing up the soup, but it's there because your brain function, those cells aren't producing as much ATP as they need to. Something is blocking that, whether those coenzymes and enzyme, their production is being blocked, so you're not producing enough ATP, whether it's a viral infection or bacterial infection or even parasitic infection in the brain, causing a soup of yuck to be floating through the brain. We have to get a little bit more specific in our studies and our studies on you to determine this. And the great thing is, we've got 2 practitioners here in the room
who each specialize in different aspects of it.
And we can bounce things off of each other.
We have different viewpoints and the same viewpoints on some things, so at least that can bring up different thoughts.
That's right. And we have colleagues that we can bounce things off of. Mm-hmm. We've got Dr. Damiani over in Rome, phenomenal anesthesiologist over there, trained in acupuncture and oriental medicine. Where are you going to find that?
Right.
We've got Dr. Coleman up in Madison. We've got different doctors that we can bounce questions off of.
We're not the generic approach.
You don't want a Lone Ranger.
Mm-mm.
That's what makes the Siloam Center so great, I think. We have a YouTube viewer, and I don't want to butcher your name. Mirak Deger, is that? How would we say that? You're more intelligent than I am.
I don't know what that's C, but but they say hi there. We got that at least.
Hello, thank you for joining us. So, what have we learned today? We've learned that we've just scratched the surface on mitochondria, which means we've got plenty of material for future shows. But we're going to be taking this show a little bit deeper than we have in the past. As you can see, we've already been cleaning our format up, and our format's going to continue to get better as we work with Hero over in the Philippines. This is going to get better and better. And if you have questions about your health or something along those lines, feel free to put it in the comments of previous videos, put it in the comment of this video, Facebook us, YouTube us. What are some other ways? Carrier pigeon us.
Please. Do you have the email for the Siloam Center?
Info@Siloam Center. INFO@Siloam Center. Siloam is SILOAM, as in pool of Siloam. Maybe someday we can talk about the reason for that name. Get a hold of us. Hero, if you could put into the closing credits of this our email, or put it on the underneath of the video, however that works, so that people can get a hold of us if they need to.
But now at least you got an idea of how the mitochondria work in our body and why it's important.
You know, the basics.
Yeah.
The bare basics.
We can go on from the stepping stone.
So, now that you've wasted a perfectly good hour, and yes, I did steal that line, you're not using it anymore, and I don't think it was copyrighted. Flattery is what is it? Never mind, I just messed that one up. Something is the biggest form of flattery.
That's not copying, but it's the same
mimicking,
kind of thing. Yeah.
something like that. Thank you for joining us. It's something I look forward to every week, even if I forget what the topic is. This was the third week in a row I had to say, hey, what are we talking about today?
But this is all just based on the knowledge that we have offhand, and we're not scripted.
No.
We roll with this.
We have no writers. Who can afford a writer?
In these trying times?
In these trying times, who can afford a writer, even if they are going cut rate on monster.com right now? No writers. But this is the quality of the practitioner that you get at the Siloam Center. And as we bring in other practitioners, they've got certain requirements that they've got to meet. And that is more than just can you fog a mirror and can you walk and chew gum. It's how knowledgeable are you? Are you a good fit within the culture of the clinic? Academically, spiritually, are you a good fit? That's one of the things that makes this clinic so beautiful when you walk in the door and you can feel it. And people comment on that all the time. So, thank you again for joining us. From all of us at the Siloam Center, from the front end staff to Norm, the janitor, Hero in the Philippines, thank you for joining us and have a good week. We'll see you back next Tuesday at noon.
See you then, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.